the 99% versus the 1% on Wall Street, or so the protesters claim. But are they right? What do they want, and do they have a genuine beef? I'm Steve Green, this is Trifecta, and here to answer those questions and more, of course, Scott Ott and Bill Whittle. Gentlemen, Scott, I'm going to start with you. National Review's Rich Lowry, and he's not exactly a raging liberal, he wrote on Tuesday that the 99% makes some good points, especially about college kids having too much debt and too few job opportunities. Is he right? Should we be listening?
Well, from the beginning of this, I've thought that they probably do have some legitimate complaints, and we'll get into this in another episode of Trifecta this week about their tactics. But yeah, I think it's reasonable to ask the question, why does a college education cost so much more than it did before and yet qualify you less for the kind of jobs that you need to be prepared for in this economy? And the question should be asked of this whole, education monster that's backed up by the federal government to say, how is it that the price keeps going up? Well, the reason the price keeps going up is because it's free money, because the government is paying for so much of it, and it's all out of whack. So their answer is capitalism. They just don't know that yet, but the grievance, I think, is legitimate.
Oh, absolutely right. And I want to get into your second point in just a minute here, but first, Bill, I agree that these kids have valid complaints. So is this a tea party of the left, or is it something else?
I don't agree that they have valid complaints. There's only one complaint to be made in this entire Occupy Wall Street thing, and that's the complaint about cronyism. You'll hear the term crony capitalism, but as my friend Jeremy Boring says, crony capitalism is a contradiction in terms. Capitalism allows the free market to let businesses rise and fall, succeed and fail based on their merits, where the new and the fast take over from the old and the sclerotic. Cronyism is where government decides to point its finger at whatever industry it likes the best and write laws and tax codes and regulations that keep other people out of the free market. So if they want to protest cronyism, they should be doing it at Washington. They shouldn't be doing it in New York. As far as the education bubble goes, these kids have degrees in anthropology and women's studies and bitterness studies and all these other things. If they had degrees in engineering, they wouldn't be looking for a job, and likewise in nursing, and likewise in anything other useful. They spent $100,000 to go to college for 4 years or 5 years and have a good time. And now they're stuck with it. And
the term capitalism was coined by Karl Marx. When you hear it used as an insult by the left, just keep that in mind. Scott, the president is explicitly positioning himself alongside the protesters so he can run against the GOP as the party of Wall Street next year. What would you tell these kids to set them straight?
Well, if he's running against Wall Street or against the Republican Party as the party of Wall Street, I would tell these kids, hey, just go to opensecrets.org and find out where the funding for President Obama's 2008 campaign came from and where the funding continues to come from. See if you can find a few Wall Street dollars in that little kitty. And they absolutely will find that. It's not only disingenuous of him to do this, but I think it's ultimately a failed strategy. I don't think that people are going to buy it, that he's actually, this millionaire author is somehow anti-capitalism.
Yeah, the protests in 1968 gave us Richard Nixon, all right? That's PJTV's own Scott Ott, host of Freedom's Charter, finally debuting right now, right here on PJTV. He's also the GOP candidate for Lehigh County Commissioner. Bill, it's a really simple question. Which are you, the 99% or the 1%?
Well, first of all, Steve, I know you're asking that facetiously, but we always make the mistake of allowing the left to define the terms in the battlefield. So let's just not use that term 99% anymore. If you want to divide the country into two parts, why don't we divide it into the 51% that pays taxes and the 49% that don't? There's a fair division for you. Or maybe you want to divide it into the portion of the country that owns stock in these various corporations and the portion that doesn't. So I just refuse the premise on its face. Again, this entire issue comes down to cronyism, comes down to the involvement of the government in business. And when that happens, bad things always occur. That's not the fault of Wall Street, that's the fault of Washington. And the final thing I'll say about corporations is that corporations have no coercive power over you at all. If you don't like Bank of America, don't do business with Bank of America. You don't get that option with the government.
That's Bill Whittle, host of Afterburner here on PJTV, and 1/3 of Whittle, Clavin, and you. Folks, the protesters, these wannabe occupiers of Wall Street, it's true, they do have a lot to be angry about. But what they have is an incoherent rage. They have no agenda, no program other than to make a nuisance of themselves until they get something. We don't know what that is. So to give you an idea of just how incoherent OWS is, the protest has been endorsed and joined by the Communist Party of the USA and by the American Nazi Party. And you know what? A protest like that can end in only one of two ways. It can fizzle out as people lose interest, or it can explode into violence. Let's hope for a fizzle. For Bill Whittle, Scott Ott, and everyone here at PJTV, I'm Steve Green.